So they're gonna start packing up the other two helicopters. Meet the group that's coming. They kind of start talking to you. For the sake of brevity, I'm gonna kick things a little bit further.
Yep.
Again, Daniel,
I to
Alex.
exchange pleasantries for them. Super talkative anyway.
Indeed. Okay, so everyone in the party, you get basically a text update that there's going to be a handful of lectures that everyone has to attend between classes.
Lectures.
Excited by this. Yes! More learning!
Please don't wet your pants.
Why would I do that? I do not. Do I look like I am ill? Do I?
No.
Oh no. Guide syndrome? Is that why
And
you
just
said this?
puts a hand on Daniel's shoulder. I think he just meant not to get too excited. The expression escapes me as well, but...
Oh, you don't know? Oh, okay. That is...
They're
I guess
pure
it makes sense
mind.
for you
I
too.
see.
I don't
I like
understand their way of
learning.
thinking.
What can I
Anyway.
say? It is what I am best at.
Any idea what's gonna be on? Was there like any indication?
Kind of like
like
scans
the
the texts.
Yeah.
Does he find like a topic at any point?
You can see that it's not specifically labeled topic, but you can see that it's a guest speaker. And that pretty much, like, everyone's getting, like, about a 30-40 minute, like, session at this one building, basically on the far end of the rec area of the school.
Nah, it just says that there's a guest speaker. Doesn't say what they're speaking about.
It was probably from one of those BSAs guys, you know.
Maybe one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the bioterrorism guys. Someone got off their
Yeah.
helicopter, so
Maybe it's
Probably
maybe they
them,
want
as you say.
to teach us something about bioterrorism. Maybe.
I mean they are our sponsors.
Yeah, and also let's not be wrong. There was quite a few events happened in the past, so
Yeah. A lot of...
Anyway, I think our session's
Daniel's
coming up soon,
already
so
on
we
the
should all
way.
head over there.
yeah.
Alright,
Agreed.
so pretty
Daniel's
much...
already on.
Leaving the two buff guys to go walk on your own. Got it.
Just more learning, more knowledge.
What happened to the buddy system?
Go fuck yourself, that's what happened. JK, that's not what was really said.
I bet at that point, just like Gen and Ray start jogging over.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, I have to walk away.
Alright, you guys will eventually, like, go through a couple of your periods. It's pretty cut standard day. Before it gets time to go to the room where the presentation's happening, you all get one more update, but this is specific to just the four of you, saying that Event 1's going to be starting in the last quarter of the day.
Oh shit.
Oh, great.
Really going to forward that onto our auxiliaries.
Yeah, same. Does it say what the event is?
No, but it says everyone's going to gather at the obelisk at about, like, 6 p.m.
Again, we'll text the group as a whole, including auxiliaries. Anyone got any idea what the first challenge is going to be?
No clue.
Do we? Do we have a role that we could make for that? A library search role
no.
or a...
There was
knowledge
literally
role?
nothing within the text that would be able to tell you what it's going to be.
But can we do a history?
I
roll
meant
to see
like...
what most
Yeah,
likely
that's
it will be?
what I-
Yeah, you
like-
guys can roll a history roll if you want. And while you do that, I'm going to cut my lights on because it's getting fucking dark.
Like it's true.
For your headphones like that,
That-
you get
Yes.
10. Okay, 10.
That's under intelligence, right?
Yes. Intelligence. What I'm learning is we need to start learning our history.
Okay, who got what?
Keeps ringing at phone.
I got a 16, and I'm the
Okay.
highest.
16?
that
I'm the
was
second.
Kevin with 13, then Daniel with 12, and finally Ray with 10.
Okay, this one was a fairly high threshold check, simply because it was going off of such obscure stuff. What I can tell you that the whole group will be able to learn from Gen in Alex's roles is essentially that the first event is typically known as the highest elimination event out of the 15 core groups picked. And historically, every year this has gone from about, 15 down to 6.
Damn!
Ah.
Oh, that's a lot. That's worrying.
Yeah, it usually goes from
Being
15 to,
April,
6
this
to
could be
8.
a really short campaign.
Yeah, we'll see how long you guys live.
calling.
We failed the first.
So glad I could make it to the
If
last.
we failed, we still live.
Welcome to the surprise finale, Jordan.
Yes. I'm so glad.
All the other guests we had plans, they're in a different campaign.
Yep,
Yeah, we're gonna have to.
that's season 2 territory there.
Ooh.
No, you do know that the first event's highest elimination, it typically cuts it down from 15 to 8 to 6 teams.
Do we at least know if it's normally a group challenge or is it completely random?
You recognize that this one's basically your core group and 2 auxiliaries you get to take with you.
Alright.
We'll take all of them still for now until we see what the events are going to be.
And
We'll
you
choose-
do know that typically the first
multiple
event
hours.
is timed.
Hmm.
time.
But
We're
that's-
also in time with that.
That's all you can get from that roll.
Perhaps we should be moving a little bit faster, Zen.
As all of you get that update and get the meeting place, it eventually rolls to before your presentation, essentially. What are the 2 auxiliaries you're going to take with you? Because essentially, as soon as you're done here, you're going to have to get hoofing.
Oh, so we're not allowed to know beforehand before we choose. Okay.
Yep.
Take 2 of our auxiliaries. I test.
Viv.
Yeah,
And
Vivian's a good choice.
Let's take Aaron. He is good under pressure, if I remember correctly, right?
yeah, but I don't remember if he was a one-trick pony or not.
No, that was Martin. Martin's a one-trick pony.
Ah,
Yeah, so I think we want Aaron and Vivian for our first.
They'll eventually show up. They basically text you back that they'll get there a little later and just go ahead and start sitting in on the presentation and they'll find seats.
mhm.
Okay. Let me grab my maps.
Maps.
Must be.
Alright. Welcome to your Academy world map, guys. You are essentially here.
Here?
Yep, right here.
Ah, a green.
So this is the obelisk, right? Where
Yep.
the helicopters came from?
And then these are... No, the helicopters landed out about here. It's way
Is it
later
baseball
on the day.
diamond?
Yep,
So-
that's the obelisk fountain. This is House Constellation. I'll mark it after this session in this house beacon.
Okay, so the dorms are pink, the blues are this. Imagine this school classrooms.
You'll
like that.
find out more of this map soon enough. That's just what I'm at liberty to tell you before we continue on.
All right.
Alright, so, you see a group of 30, 40 people enter this room. You guys can go and tell me who's gonna sit with who.
I'll sit between Ray and Ken.
It's 2 to a
Yeah,
desk. So,
Daniel.
No.
Oh, 2 to a desk.
Yep.
Oh,
I'll sit with Daniel,
Also,
and Ray can sit with.
also with Ken.
That way we're in our house groups.
Also with Ken.
they can start to teach Alex about game.
I don't know. We haven't seen Ray's game yet.
Yeah, Ray is.
It's
Actually,
gotta
we
be
have.
higher than Alexander's.
Actually, we have seen his game. It was with
Oof.
Julia.
And
Oof,
it ended
that
with
is
that.
low.
And it ended with that.
Worse than Alexander's.
No,
It
still no, but
It's worse for the other
I
party.
mean, just put it this way: everybody in Resident Evil who has game dies alone.
That's oddly true.
No, profound.
Hey, I'll have
Oh my
a-
lord! Vaguely.
The only reason I think Ray has a decent game because of its cool and its empathy. That's fine. I think it's the highest cool among all of you.
oh no, it's attractiveness that determines.
Yeah, it depends.
I'm a 4, so it's understandable, you know.
Yeah, there's still time.
Still time yet.
When we
I
gotta
don't
be
wanna
scared
die
is when
by
your
myself.
character's like 30 and hasn't met anyone. That's when we gotta freak out.
Anyway,
Alright, so basically, Ray, Alex, you sit to a desk in the middle. If Gen's with Daniel, I'm pretty sure Daniel will be like, oh my god, a lecture, I gotta be up front.
Oh yeah,
Gen doesn't
on the
mind.
front, cantilevered.
Gen is far more relaxed than Daniel is, but he
Gen is
doesn't
anchoring
mind being in
the
front.
fall.
Alright, and you can see at each of
Gen
your
is anchoring
desks
the
there's
desk.
like
Daniel is the king of the world.
And at each desk you can kind of see that there's like a small computer screen that appears to be in sync with like a bigger one in the background. And you can see that there's a bit of like a 3-panel desk up in front that goes center, then V's like that.
Can we yet tell what this is in relation to, even if it's just like it's related to bio?
I'd say you can roll me 1 flat intelligence, and we'll see how you do.
Let's see, where is it? 13.
Ready to roll. Ready to roll bad again. Ready
It's about as
to
average
roll
as I could have
badly
gotten.
once more again.
Nice.
Ready to roll bad again.
I rolled an 11.
11,
Might be
13.
cool.
What do you roll, Ray?
Nothing. I'm rolling, choosing not to make the skill check.
Learned my lesson.
Is there anything on the computers in front of us?
Oh, they're booting up.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I thought they had like booted up when we were looking at a screen of like.
Yeah,
this
it's
is
like
the
it's like a
intro kind of
home
thing.
screen that matches the same Windows 10 home on the back panel, except this would be Windows 8 right now.
Welcome. Welcome to Marhawa.
So Gen and Daniel are the highest with 13 each.
Which
You-
does make sense since we're the closest to the front.
Fair, as you
Literally.
when it just works canonically. Pretty much with that intelligence roll, you can kind of peeve out that this has something to do with the BSAA being here.
Go figure. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Like,
it's
man, they
obvious.
just showed up in like 3 helicopters, and maybe they're doing something suspicious.
and only 2 left.
Yay! We've reached Danganronpa level intelligence.
Oh, lordy.
No, as everyone's sitting in, there's kind of some murmuring chatter that most classrooms have before class starts. Then, slowly the front door kind of opens, and you see Mother Gracia basically kind of hold her hand out. And you see one of the
Daniel
figures that
Fitzpatrick.
got off the helicopter start to come in.
Wonder
Daniel
who.
starts to lean
It's Chris
forward.
Redfield.
Yep. Hey kids, welcome to boulder punching class. Boulder just falls in through the roof.
lot of it.
And Gen
Daniel literally
suddenly
turns
Be
to
the
dust.
boulder.
No. Gen and Daniel switch positions. Gen is suddenly in front, and you're just like,
Oh my god.
9.
yes, I've been
Alright.
Excellent.
not teaching
You can
punch
see
boulders.
the two figures at the door talk for a little bit, and then eventually the woman dressed in the lab coat basically starts to make her way to the front.
Is this my cue?
Si, senora.
Oh, alrighty. So, the woman walks up to the woman walks up to the podium. She's just carrying like a little laptop under her arm, and she sets it up on the podium as if getting ready to deliver a presentation. Good morning, everybody. I'm sure you have questions as to why we're here today. First off, let's get the pleasantries out of the way. My name is Amanda Watanabe, and I am actually a biotech expert, one of the most notable, actually. And today, I've organized this little lecture to have a bit of a discussion on Ouroboros, specifically.
I haven't heard of her before.
You can do the honors.
No.
Meanwhile, Gen and Daniel are now both thoroughly intrigued. Like, please, go on. You've spoken our language.
Right.
Daniel's
I was
hard
into it,
copy cover of her book out of his backpack. Like, maybe she'll sign it.
It's way
Oh,
too thick and like over the top. She clears her throat again. Now, some ground rules. I do ask that you all reserve your questions to the end, but I do encourage you to ask them once we reach the end of this brief lecture. And then she will very quickly begin. Her introduction's very quick, kind of unceremonious. So, in 1966, Oswald E. Spencer and an entourage of several bioorganic specialists discovered the strange properties of a red flower growing in remote West Africa. Upon returning to Europe, one Dr. James Marcus conducted extensive research into this peculiar plant. What was found within these flowers, since dubbed Sonnentrep daisies, would revolutionize the biodevelopment world. In doing so, Dr. Marcus and his associates would cause the death of thousands. Under specific environmental conditions, these flowers would trigger certain changes within those living in the immediate area. Bioweaponry is not a foreign concept to many of you, I'm sure. After all, we all remember the tragedy of Raccoon City and what transpired in the same West African region 3 years ago. However, what many of you might not know is the basis for all these viruses can be traced long before corporations rewrote the very fabric of human DNA. With all this in mind, we can now explore the true purpose of this lecture. This purpose being, what exactly happened in Kijuju in 2009? Why did it happen? Simply put, the likes of Albert Wesker and Umbrella began developing a strand known as Ouroboros in 2006. Following a black market infiltration, a small team of BSAA agents encountered the virus's effects on the locals. Ouroboros itself was a parasite that carried the original strand. All its development originated from one source, that simple red flower, and the lab that would follow its discovery. Now, it's important to note that the daisy was not the origin of what would come to be known as the original virus. As previously mentioned, the pollen produced by the flower was merely a catalyst, the criteria of which is buried within human biology. The locals that were initially infected displayed common symptoms found in the T and G variations. Some lucky few would fall dreadfully ill and perish, while others would experience a change of superhuman proportions. This would include, but was not limited to, enhancement of strength as well as endurance. Some subjects exhibited grotesque mutations. This would inevitably prove deadly to those around them. Even more unsettling was the fact that the virus could manifest not only in humans, but anything with living cells. This is likely why Son and Trepe Daisy could provoke the disease in organisms around them. These factors would also be emulated in Ouroboros. Following the discovery, Dr. Marcus would have his research abruptly halted after the Swiss government pulled their funding from the project. He would later join the aforementioned Oswald E. Spencer at his estate under private funding. It is here the A and B strands were birthed following some very questionable experimentation on live subjects. I just lost my place. There we go. While this form of testing is often frowned upon, it cannot be argued that there were no results. A lab would later be established in the region where the Daisy was located by the exploration team. With Marcus in the US and his colleagues abroad, new strands would later be developed, these being the T and G viruses. It was at this point in the 2000s that Wesker and his umbrella colleagues would continue bioengineering these strands into what would eventually become Ouroboros. Now that the origin of this strand is understood, the question of what and why is abundantly clear. This leaves one final query, however. Why are we talking about Ouroboros? The answer to this is far more simple and requires much less context. To put it bluntly, Ouroboros has no cure. This makes it especially deadly compared to most other variations of the initial virus, and has proved to be the biggest mystery in the bioweaponry world. As of yet, science has only been able to piece together its origins, and no hypothesis to potential solutions have ever been recorded. While this may seem rather disheartening, it doesn't need to be. This paves the way for new generations of scientists. For you. Now, are there any questions?
Gen raises his hand.
You there, in front.
Have you worked directly with any samples of the T or what was the other virus that was said?
G.
Daniel would know that. I don't
G.
remember.
Gen would know it as well, but
Yeah.
I as a player forgot because I was trying to type in our notes.
Pay attention, because if I note take and focus at the same time, my brain turns into lasagna.
I get a 50-50 on that one.
So, like, he's asking if I've worked with the big virus, or
Yeah, if you've ever worked with any of the Ouroboros or the T or G virus.
Of course. In fact, I have written a few papers on the matter. I'm quite well versed in the T and G variations. Ouroboros I am as well, although as you probably remember from the lecture itself, not much is actually known about it except for its foundations.
Mm-hmm. Gen probably raises his hand a number of times and like starts asking more and more pointed questions as though he's done a lot of research on this himself, but I personally have not.
All good. Did anyone
Ray
else?
raised his hand. Ray raised
I
his hand.
have a question.
Yep.
I'll
Go ahead, Ray.
I'll point at Ray.
Thank you. Is the Ouroboros strand still a thing that exists, at least as in... Has there been any recent mentions of it? Or did that one happen 3 years ago?
Well, no one has access to it. But within the general public, whether it's still out there infecting people, well, Not to my knowledge, no.
Thank you.
I had a question.
Yes,
You were talking about having found subjects about what happened with the viruses. Is there anything in common with these test subjects?
From what I recall, I believe they were two women. As of their relationship to one another, I am unsure. Their names, unfortunately, there's little record of it, but they were women.
He's keeping his lips shut hand, and it's blood slowly pooling in his elbow.
The veins are popping.
He's just waiting the whole time. Not to beleaguer a point, but is the actual challenge? Do you know?
I'm afraid I came here to talk about Ouroboros. I know little about the school goings on.
That answers that very much.
You're very welcome. Any more questions?
Question.
Gen raises his hand again.
Yes, you.
Rails. Isn't it?
Do you have any recommendations for one who might want to study this kind of stuff more in depth?
Well, I believe your university has lots of books on the subject. I, of course, do recommend my own. But if you're wanting to study Ouroboros in particular, you might want to look into the West African region. As I said, it was called Kajudu. Perhaps look up the history. Maybe even read into the daisy itself, although there's not too much written about it except for a physical description and how it contributed to the making of Ouroboros. But aside from that, that's pretty much the information we have, as I said. Not much is known about Ouroboros as of yet.
Gen responds in Congo, the regional dialect where the plant is found. Thank you. I will.
She has no idea what you said, but she nods. You there? She points at Ray.
Thank you. What happened with the Daisy now? With since it was the origin point, the catalyst for all these viruses.
They were destroyed. As far as I know, there's no physical samples left.
Is there a possibility there might be more that we don't know about? I mean, I imagine, but
You can tell she's trying to be vague. Perhaps. Who's to say?
human perception roll, please.
I suppose you can roll a human perception roll, Ray.
I suppose you could.
Do you want to
Should I
roll the
make a roll?
same just to bluff him?
It
Yeah.
actually is a deception roll.
Yeah, better yet if you have
Fast talk.
deception.
I want to
Persuasion and fast talk.
Ooh, okay, so I've got, is that under cool?
No, it's under empathy.
Ooh. Try and grab a lot of that, boys. Got a big fat 0 in it.
You need to be.
All the sides.
There's oratory in cool, which would be how good you are at giving a nice talk. Not
I
necessarily
do.
how good you are at lying.
I do have more in cool. Can I roll that?
You can most definitely roll that cool roll.
Thank God.
Rolls a
Maybe-
natural one.
Oh my God, I would die. I would quit the game.
Alright, so I get nothing. So I'm like,
I mean,
Thank
Gen has a 24.
Yes,
As a reason
but
I
that
rolled human
wasn't.
perception.
you.
The
yelled at me,
question
I was-
wasn't Gen, so I wouldn't allow that.
Yeah.
I mean, he'd know she was talking around the question.
No, man. No, man.
Huh.
I mean, maybe, but I asked what I wanted to know, and I'll just stone cold sir is all I'm getting. I'm just gonna. Thank you.
Can't be mad, can't be mad. Alright.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
We're just really dedicated students.
I noticed that you've been talking about accidents that have happened in the news about Raccoon City and all that stuff. But I noticed that you guys haven't mentioned about Terra Gricia.
Oh, well, is there a question in there, or are you wondering why we haven't mentioned Terra Gricia?
Well, it's basically two questions in one. Why haven't you guys mentioned about it, and what virus was it that actually caused, the accident to happen?
Man, you guys are cool sometimes. You know that, right?
Okay, so Alex would, and probably everyone else in the room would, as soon as he even says the word Terra Grigia, like her face automatically sours. And when he's like, "Why didn't you mention it?" she does take a while to answer. Well, Terra Grigia has to do with the T variation in particular. It doesn't relate really to Ouroboros. That's why it wasn't mentioned.
But didn't you just mention the T virus earlier before?
Well, yes, it's relevant to the whole history of Bioterra, but we were going more into detail about Ouroboros. If you have a question about the T virus in particular, I'm happy to answer that.
Well, when said infected person gets mutated, if they were to suppose injure a civilian and then that civilian has survived the experience of Terra Grigia, would that civilian be infected?
Would I know that?
You would. I mean, the T virus is transmitted through bites. The T abyss virus that Terra Grigia was caused by basically spreads through liquids more than anything. So, like, small scrapes and cuts, you would be fine, but if they physically bit you or got blood on you, then that's when you're in the danger zone!
Danger zone! Well, this particular subset of the T virus is transmitted primarily through fluids. So it's a little bit more risky than your average Bioterra virus. If you were to get blood on you, for example, could be a bit, well, iffy, to say the least. But definitely, it's a very real possibility. I wouldn't say guarantee, because anything's possible, but, well, it's a high possibility, yes.
Okay. I think that's all my questions for now.
I don't know if it connects. There's so many of you putting your hands out.
Oh, definitely.
Big hat, and I've already spoken.
I haven't spoken to Daniel in a while, so I'll point to the German guy in the front. You there?
To ask this question, I have to ask a question of the GM. Any significant outbreaks in Central Europe?
Ooh, a lot, I think.
Central Europe? You're asking specifically about Central Europe, like the UK, Germany, France, and other places like that?
Yeah, like that region, because I don't know, like the if there were any additional outbreaks that you put in there for those reasons.
The outbreaks, as far as history's gone, is America's had like one, then basically Terra Grigia was considered a European outbreak because that was in the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Italy. Then you also have a couple smaller, like, one-off terrorist incidents in, like, France or in Germany, like that. Like, there hasn't been central outbreaks, but there's been a couple small cases where, what's the word I'm looking for? Paramilitary had to be involved to basically de-escalate a situation that could have become an outbreak.
Would Daniel have heard about any of these?
I'd say you could have heard about, like, one or two in Germany.
All right. Daniel's going to ask about the for the name. The Wilhelm incident. What are your opinions on the Wilhelm incident? Admit that fairly close to where I used to live, to where my family is.
From what I remember, there were a lot of screams.
So like this is one of the ones that like BSAA kind of stopped from becoming a
full-on outbreak.
Well, as far as what I remember of the incident, I didn't deal with it directly. It was very well handled by the VSAA and prevented substantial loss of life.
There is another question in your answer. Outbreaks that you have dealt with personally?
Well, do I kind of have free reign over this one, Tommy?
I'd say you'd have free reign over it. Like, you could have very easily been part of the humanitarian effort after the Kaijuju incident, and then I would have said, like, you're in your 30s, so you could have been, like, just starting out when Terra Grigia happened.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't there directly, but I did study some Terra Grigia samples, and I was directly involved in the incident in Kajuju. I was part of the humanitarian effort there.
Daniel's just beaming because he thinks he thought up a good question.
Well done. I'll point out spells characters.
Yep.
Yeah.
Raise your nods.
Right.
After that, I think we should probably cut it.
Yeah, sorry, last one. So if there's any ever case of Ouroboros near us, hypothetically speaking, what should we do? What actions should we take? Or should we just call for help, and that's it?
In terms of outbreaks here, no, not to my knowledge. As for what you should do, certainly stay out of the thick of it. Ouroboros can be it can get out of control very quickly. As I mentioned, there's the mutations to consider. It makes the infected incredibly dangerous, more so than most others that are infected. Almost a grotesque proportion. The aftermath of Kajuju was rather gruesome. All I can say is, if there is an outbreak of Ouroboros in your city, get out. You don't want to stay there. The BSAA has various methods of dealing with such a thing. They did in Kajuju, after all. And the best way, obviously, is to purge the infected. Unfortunately, there's no cure. That's the only choice that we have. And to contain the situation and bring to justice those that perpetuated the initial infection.
Thank you.
One extra note, you can choose to add this if you want to, Jordan, but in basic study of Ouroboros, there's two other factors that you could add on to your answer. One, Ouroboros gains in mass the more biomass it gathers. So, like, the more bodies it feeds off of, the bigger of an Ouroboros infected it is. And then, two, Ouroboros, at least in its initial stages, is very sensitive to extreme heat.
Oh, okay. Yeah, she probably would have added that as well, and probably would have mentioned that BSAA would probably utilize heat to try and contain it as quickly as possible, and to get everyone like away from the main area to stop them try and spread that infection because it gets worse, obviously, as it goes on. So she'd add that.
Yeah. Thank you. That's all for me.
Okay, last call for questions before I close the scene.
Daniel has a question, but he probably already know the answer to it before showing up to the physical lecture. There is signing afterwards.
I don't usually do signings, but sure.
I hope. As we're talking about escaping Ouroboros, if per se we happen to have an incident of it in our surroundings, how are we to detect this virus?
Is there any method of like actually detecting it before they get tentacle head or whatever the fuck else Ouroboros
Not
get?
that, no.
People that get infected with Ouroboros exhibit very comatose-like states. Pretty much has a brief incubation period once it enters the body where the person will be fine for about like an hour. Then they'll typically go in... They'll get a fever that's way higher than normal temperatures, like say like a 122 Fahrenheit fever, and then they'll go into a coma for about like 30 minutes. And then if their body accepts the virus, it's a very slow transformation where they can blend in for a while. If it doesn't, they kind of start transforming from that point.
Well, Ouroboros does have very particular symptoms. It is, like most bioweapons, a brief fever period. However, with Ouroboros in particular, they usually slip into a coma state. If that should happen, it should definitely be treated with suspicion, but at that point, it should be left to medical professionals to determine if the virus is active in this person. After all, a bioweapon is not the only reason you could have a fever, but definitely you should report it as soon as you see it. Only if someone slips into a coma, obviously report that. But yes, there's ways that you can go about trying to detect it beforehand. Just be vigilant. Look out for the symptoms.
Seems like all the questions answered.
Okay.
Best we do that.
And she will obviously answer all of Gen's questions, all the various ones he asked.
Yep, and there
Daniel
were
will
other
probably have a
students
couple
around the
of
room
others,
that
but-
did ask other questions. Like, I'd like to
Okay,
say the
yeah.
questionnaire period lasted about like an hour-ish.
Now, curious question, like, are there any other questions that kind of deviate from all like specifically mentioning like Terra Grigia, maybe even Raccoon City?
I mean, Gen probably brings up a number of like specific cases of
Yeah.
stuff, like, but it would all be the kind of stuff that you can find without any first-hand or restricted access knowledge.
Yeah, like she answers everyone's questions. She's never like, I can't say that. But she is particularly kind of trying to avoid questions that divert from Ouroboros, and seems uncomfortable answering the ones that do. Even sometimes a little irritated, but yeah, she does answer them.
Okay. Well, with that, the questionnaire segment of the presentation ends. It lasted about like an hour, hour and a half. Everyone leaves the room. I'd say you four are left afterwards, obviously, because Daniel wanted to get his book signed, and then the room appears to be empty if anyone wanted to have an off-the-cusp scene with Jordan's character while we have her.
Can und I I like your work. Very intimidating.
Thank you. She kind of awkwardly takes the book and will start signing it. So, what do you study here, if you don't mind me asking?
Medicine and mathematics. I'm trying to get into fields where I can develop cures and heal severe physical injuries.
Gen will pop up from behind him. It'd be easier to explain all the ones that he doesn't actually have the book for.
I see. And you
I
both...
have a book for tennis.
I wouldn't bother, it's very boring. You both take classes together, I assume. Are you also studying medicine?
I am here on biology. I have done quite
Also,
a bit of
here's the
research.
reasons that Sorry.
Go on.
I was just gonna say, also he's kind of the reasons that people like me have to study medicine.
Oh.
Less so than he gives the indication, but if little ones didn't get into fights that they couldn't back themselves up in, I wouldn't need to step in to help you.
This is true.
Gen is also
True.
a 6 foot
I do not
mass
deny
of
this.
muscle.
Right. Well, here's your signed copy. And she'll slide it across the table to him.
Daniel's just in his head. I'm gonna frame it. I'm gonna frame it. I'll frame it. I'm gonna frame it. I'm gonna frame it.
I have your personal. You to a much smaller audience. Mind if I ask what books you read to? I mean, obviously, I know your first-hand knowledge is probably far better than what you'd find in any book. But what books led you down the road to becoming such an accomplished scientist, and in this field specifically?
Well, I wouldn't say it was books per se, but more of a macabre interest, I guess you could say. I was probably a few years older than you when most of the initial outbreaks were happening. We all heard about what happened, and I suppose as an interest I started looking into Umbrella and discovered that biotech was something I wanted to get in. Not because of, specifically because of Umbrella, but more so an interest in the biomechanics themselves.
Again, there's definitely a brief flash of like a frown as Umbrella gets brought up multiple times, and he kind of nods. Yes, they have a way of dragging people in.
Yes. Anyway, as for books you should read, she starts listing off several.
Again, notes them down.
Yeah, including
Daniel starts taking them out of his backpack.
sorry.
This one, and this one, and these three, this pamphlet.
Yes, all of those. All of them.
Everybody likes to come up. Everybody wants to come up to where you're sort of when they're done. I must thank you for your teaching. It was very interesting, also informative.
I'm glad to hear it. What are you studying here, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, apologies. I study physical education and coaching.
Oh, a bit different to most of your other classmates that I've spoken to previously.
Yes, but learning about this also helps, physical education isn't just, does have some level of biology into it, not as much as, science is a scientific study, but teaching and lecturing others on how to avoid certain things is a helpful technique to use. So strange,
Of course.
but I think I definitely learned from what you've given out.
Of course. Good to know.
Thank you.
Was there anything in particular that you wanted to expand on?
More, how do you approach people who don't understand a subject? How would you handle that situation? Well, yeah, I imagine like the subject of biotech is one that only a few people know of. Very hard to expand on.
No, just the way I usually present information is get into the foundations first. People need context. Talk about the history of something, why it's there, why it's important, and then any questions they have after, answer them.
Yeah, good advice. Thank you.
You are most welcome.
You have not
Very
spoken Vista Quiet. Daniel says as he points to Alexander.
Yes.
I wouldn't say he was.
And Daniel is going to take that door to... Sorry. Daniel wants to take that door to find the auxiliaries to make sure that they're here or that they are doing all right.
Yeah, they're here. They kind of got in at like the first quarter of the presentation and kind of stayed quiet most of the time. Now, I will say we are on the death clock again for this meet, so should we cycle
I
one
did
more
see
time?
Yeah, I have one already set up to
Alright.
go once we're good. If we want to jump off now, I can post
Yeah,
it.
we'll go ahead and do that.
I just stopped the recording, so I'll re-record when we chat.